Hello, my dear friends. I'm Heidi, and this is a continuation from the interview I'm having with my very good friend, somebody who's made a huge impact and influences me greatly, Sayo. You started on the previous dialogue on your name and how you started with that, and how the process of the change, how it's impacted your life. Could you please elaborate on that?
All right, it's interesting you talked about influence because obviously influence is a very powerful thing, and I don't want to come across like some sort of guru or if it's a controlling thing. It's not. I'm just aware of the energy that's present in all of our name dynamics, and energy is a very powerful and beautiful thing if it's dealt with respect and treated in the right way. Now I know I can go off at tangents, which is quite that is the natural flow of things because again it's energy. But obviously, you're not born with a name like Perseo or Persei unless you've got some sort of kooky or hippie kind of parent. But it was a name I created for myself because of the dynamics of the letters and the characters that exist in the name and how those dynamics and components align and resonate with my existing family names and my middle name. So my birth name, and I don't really want to disclose my birth name really ideally, but my birth name is now my middle name. Now, my birth name, as it was, wasn't a difficult name
To say?
to sound or to say, but the energy in it blocked, restricted, and caused conflicts. So, on the surface, or how I presented on the surface of things, I come across natural. I'd come across confident. I'd come across happy-go-lucky and cheery. But the undertones was I'd retain, and this is quite commonplace. There's a lot of people that go through this. So if you can call it mental health, you can call it anxiety and stress. I was dealing with an internal dialogue, an internal monologue that wasn't working for me.
Okay.
It was self-limiting, self-debilitating. It caused me a lot of stress. I would always question things. I would always doubt myself. It knocked my self-esteem. Didn't have that inner belief. Crikey, I would never be doing something like this. I wouldn't have the confidence to speak publicly or even
Okay,
talk to
yeah.
anybody. And there were mental issues because I would worry and I would stress myself and I would self-sabotage. And all the goodness, all the best things about me, I'd give away or I'd give to other people. So I'd empower and promote other people, which I still do in a very powerful way. But I also have this energy, if you like, that I work with that keeps me buoyant and positive. And it's different from neuro-linguistic programming. It's different from positive mental attitude. It's just an energy now. I understand how the dynamic works. So when I created the name Perseo, first and foremost, that letter P,
Yes.
it's a very important letter to me. It's a very important letter. The letters P and the letters F are a power dynamic. So they're assertive. They're a confident letter. It's a letter that expects and demands and delivers. It's a letter that, you think about the letter P and all the letters that go with it: penetration, purpose, power, positivity.
So a name, for example, like
Paul.
Stephen.
Yeah,
If it has the PH,
the P in it will
Yes.
have the same resonance. Poise. Yeah. You could ask it. It's not really control, but poise, calmness, composure.
Right.
Okay, so yes, names like Paul or Paula or Pauline or Pamela
Yes.
or Peter. Pete, is the shortened version
Yes.
of it as well. So these names deliver. There's
Okay.
a presence, there's a calmness, there is this influence because it is a letter of influence.
Right.
And again, when these letters are stacked, that power
Yes.
or that energy dynamic is increased. Obviously, you've got to be mindful that you don't have too much of this energy
So you
because
can handle it.
because it could pull things out of balance. Everything's about balance,
Yes.
obviously. So the P dynamic was a very important dynamic to me. The letters themselves, because looking at my whole name, I was looking at a balance of what I didn't have. So there were certain letters that I needed for perception and for valuing and application. It's all right, you have all these people that have such ability. They might have a lot of creative ability, a lot of expressive ability, a lot of emotional ability, but they don't have the direction with it. They don't know how to channel it or apply it or direct it. So you have to look at certain energies and work with them in a certain way and then deliver them so that they work for you. So every single letter in that name brings something to the table. It has an influence of its own. secondary, or it depends on which way you put the significance, but the whole name together has a particular dynamic. And in this case, the dynamic is a creative one, an independent one. It's a protective one. If you believe in these sort of things, it creates an armor. Right. So things won't stick to me. They kind of deflect. Also keeps me moving. As long as I'm moving, it moves with me. It is a very emasculated energy, even though I wouldn't class myself as a very emasculated type of guy. Because there's a good balance. Again, it's about balance. Yes. It is a creative force. There's a will to it. There's a drive to it, and these are things that are very important if you want to succeed, or if you've got some sort of ambition, or you need a direction. As long as you're on the front foot and you're moving with this particular dynamic, it will work for you. So it helps you to express and create.
So you feel by you changing your name from your birth name to Psayo, it has given you that drive and that sort of
most definitely
drive forward.
The beauty about the energy dynamic in my name and me doing it and working with myself, and I did this around 2004, 2005. The change and me noticing the change was almost instantaneous. There was obviously things I noticed straight away, but then over time I could see how it was impacting on my environment and how others were perceiving me. And obviously, in my own personal life with my own personal family, once they got their head around me changing my name, because obviously that was quite political, and it created a lot of upheaval and a lot of different dynamics. Yes. But once people got their head around it, they could see the change too. Wow. This is something that you could measure.
Yes.
Now, in an earlier conversation, we were talking about the dynamics from our dates of birth, and we have a particular dynamic where you can see the direction you're moving in. Well, the direction I'm moving personally is one of self-awareness.
Do you mean the dynamics, for example, because some people would never have heard of this, numerologist and how you deal with things. And from the first time I met you, there is certainly such an aura of energy that comes with you. Every time we meet, there's such strength to you. So when people who don't know about this, read a horoscope because they believe they've been brought up in realizing that there is a certain story within your birth date. In the horoscope, does this work differently to that?
Well, strangely, obviously, it's a very sensitive subject when we start talking about astrology or any kind of what some people would label pseudoscience, or something that's a little bit arcane or mysterious. Yes, there's a particular numbers historically, before people could count and use them for measuring, they were also very symbolic. So when you understand about symbols, we talked about numerology. Yes, I work with numbers, and in that aspect, it is a numerological aspect, but I don't call it that. I call it numerolinguistics as a language. It's the language I'm working with, or the number dynamic, because the number unfolds and you can read and explore and make certain discoveries.
Yes, and changes.
So yes, even for me, because I'm quite dismissive of a lot of these things as well, and I like to see the proof. But the great thing about these things, especially when you're working with time, you can see things unfolding. Things become quite revelatory, and you can make sense of things. So yes, for those that are of that closed mind, I think even for myself, when you've got, I don't like the idea of being narrow-minded, but I like to see the proof of the pudding. And I always say this: the proof of the pudding is always in the taste and the eating. Yes. But I'll always give you something to think about, and I would challenge anybody. You need to look at something, and then you need to. I can give you a body of evidence, and then you can sit back in your own time and make observations, and then measure those observations. Now, I was very fortunate enough. I started doing this with myself. Not long after, I started working with the energy of my wife. It sounds really crazy, but then we had children. Yes. So then my children became my next test subjects, if you like. Yes. Subjects. I don't like using the word subjects, but again, it's something that plays out, and you can see it. So when I'm describing, and strangely enough, when I had my own children, my love and passion for this craft grew exponentially. Yes. And obviously I made a lot of friends, and I had a lot of this passion then becomes an obsession, and then after the obsession it almost became like a career path for me. Yes. So there's real psychological aspects to this, but the more people that come on board and the more people I worked with and the work I was doing with them, I could see the results. So when I'm talking with, as a classic example, I had a message of one of my friends who was also a client. when my child was born 12 years ago, she had a daughter that was a few weeks older. And she had this birth name, and she said, "Oh, what do you think of this name?" And I said, "Oh, it's a great name. Her date of birth is fantastic, but she needs a little bit more of this. She needs a little bit more of this. You should give her a middle name that has this." She ran it through her partner, totally dismissive, wasn't interested. Okay. They were having, I think they were having an extension, so they had to clear out their loft. In doing so, she come across this profile I'd written 12 years ago, and she goes, "Oh, Persio done that for you when you were a baby."
Yes.
She read it. As a 12-year-old reading about something, how on earth did he know this? How did he know I was going to... Because it's quite intimate. It's very personal.
It is. And it's proof as well.
She was reading about how she thinks, how she feels, what she does, her attitude towards things, the influence and how she can be influenced by things. She wanted to know more. So I sat with her again. But this time I sat with her dad, who was a psychologist.
Right.
Okay. And all of a sudden, he opened up.
Yes.
So with their permission, we were changing her name. We were adding to her name some 12 and a half years after she was born. The dynamic of her since she's changed her name, unbelievable.
Amazing.
Unbelievable.
And that's just proof, isn't it, that however skeptic you are, there is a process, a measurement, a dynamic, as you say, to this energy and to the vibration and everything, the way you say it.
The interesting thing is, I'm talking about something that you have no proof of. I could be making this up as far as you're concerned because you're watching it. But the proof is, I mean, we'll take an example. I mean, we talk about an energy. We talk about a name.
Yes.
Now, if you are a particular name, then everybody that is this name will have this dynamic and this energy. The energy changes when you add it to your middle names, your surnames, and then obviously the energy dynamic changes when you correlate it with your date of birth. Okay, because it's all about dynamics. So let's just say a name at random. So talk about a name.
Tell me about the name, for example, Stephen. Somebody called Stephen with a PH, for example.
Okay, because obviously, you know, with Stephen, there's Stephen. The PH makes a massive difference because you have Stephen with a V, and even though it's similar, it's a different energy. Now, the thing where they relate both is when they're both called Steve. You know, we live in a society now where we like to shorten things, so it's very rare you come across someone that introduces themselves as Stephen with a PH. But if they are meticulous about it, they'll say it's Stephen with a PH. Now, you have to appreciate that all our official documentation will have our full names, our first name, our middle name, any prefixes, and our surnames. And that has a vibration and an energy that we resonate with. Equally, we have an energy from our first names and we have an energy from our first names and surnames. We have an energy from any moniker, title or nickname. Okay, every name that we use, every title that we use, it's a title, a handle, a tag.
Like
so,
a sir or,
so if you're an artist, you might have a particular handle.
A doctor. Or,
if you have, if you're a musician, you might have a particular name or a stage name.
Yes.
Every name that we use or have is important. So bring it back on track. The name Stephen, and if I was to break it down, okay, and this will relate to every single Stephen with a PH. Okay, so the S, which is the cornerstone of every name, the first name or the first letter is the cornerstone of every name, and in this case, the S is an expressive dynamic. So, good communication. Now, this is an interesting concept because the energy that goes with Stephen it's a powerful energy. It's a very purposeful energy. It's a matter-of-fact energy, but it's expressive in expressing that matter-of-factness. It's very correct. So the S is very enthusiastic, it's very optimistic, and it's very positive. It's very invested in things outside of oneself. So, you know, status and influence are a big thing. It's a big expressive dynamic. And then moving along, the P, as we touched on before, hence Persio, is a power dynamic, a composed dynamic. So there will be this stillness, calm, composure, control. And that's not controlling, that's being in control. Because, I mean, it could all be going to the pan. But there's a measure of control. There's a measure there of being able to remain in the moment, remain calm. This is why these letters are very important. The whole expression, I won't quickly explain, I don't know if I have done this already, but there are three components to every name. There's an expression, in as much as what it is, what it's about. There's the emotive, what it wants, what it desires. And then there's this energy of influence or attitude, how it goes about, what it does, and how other people see it or perceive it. And this is why I say that names are mantras, because they have an influence on the environment and they're also influenced by the environment. So The expression of Stephen is one of purpose and power and control. It's measurable. It's standards. Dare I like saying? I don't like saying it in this way because it sounds like it's controlling, but there's a judgment and there's a justice. So these things are important. The truth is important.
Okay.
Doing it right is important. Doing it correct is important. It has strong scruples and strong values. It has a strong sense of morals. It's very generous when it's championing a good cause, a worthy cause. It will not like injustices or anything that's not good or deemed vulgar. Okay, yes. Breaking that energy down again, it's expressive in doing these things. Okay, but there's also an inquisitive side, a curious nature. It wants to explore and investigate, but it always does it measured, always does it composed. But there's always purpose. There's always a direction. It's going somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's important. When we look at the first vowel, it's an E. So again, this inquisitive, explorative energy, this nature where wants something to happen. You know, all of a sudden I need to be moving. It's not working for me just sitting still, being contained. I need to be out there. I need to be doing something. Then you couple it with the other vowel, the other E, and all of a sudden we've got this very pioneering spirit. Need to be free. Cannot do containment.
Right.
Okay. Now let's look at the influence and the attitude of this energy. I'm just going to quickly work this out. 7, 25. Okay, so now we've got something that's it's intelligence. Looking at a Stephen, there'll be an intelligence. Now, there's also this little detachment. It's like a coolness. You know, it's like a little moat. You can't just reach it and access it.
Okay.
There's certain things you need to overcome. Now, like I said, this is a different energy from the energy of Steve, but this is the energy of Stephen. So the energy of Stephen, they look intelligent. They've got their own look. They've got their own quirkiness, okay. Unusual. They'll be drawn to more unusual things, unusual, interesting leanings, interesting persuasions. They like to do things their own way. They're drawn to the characters of life or the things that are a bit more unusual that they'll need to investigate and explore because it's an explorative, investigative energy. Okay, it's different. That's a better way of looking at it. Yes. They'll have different leanings, different interests. Okay. They will like their own time. Even though they'll be friendly, warm and expressive, yes, they will like to do things on their own. They like their own time. Like I said, there's lots of things that change this dynamic, you know, other names, the date of birth, but this is the energy that goes with Stephen with a PH.
Wow. That will be amazing for anybody called Stephen to hear, isn't it? As you express the dynamics and what their character is like, their feelings, their emotions, their attitude.
There's a lot in a name.
Incredible.
There's a lot of a name. Each letter, it brings some. The greatest thing about the name Stephen, obviously, the letters in it, the predominant letters in it, are the letters of movement. So there's this need to do something.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And watch us, follow us on the next dialogue. Thank you very much. Bye.